Gerald Busby, it's apartment 521, 5th floor. Make a right-hand turn when you get out of the elevator.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I can stand on my hands.
Okay.
Have you ever seen me stand on Baltimore? That's one.
Yeah, and then on Tuesday we do it.
When I got to New York, I was working as a traveling salesman for Oxford University Press, selling textbooks, and I was cooking. I was a cook, and a friend of mine, a young composer. This was in 1969. Virgil was a critic. He was more famous as a critic most of his life than he was as a composer. My relationship with him was not really so much about music per se. It was he was kind of like a Zen master. It was sort of like learning how to think like he did and how to be very specific and no nonsense. And the Paul Taylor piece was done on Broadway, Runes, and I played it in the pit. I invited him, and he was sitting on about the third row because he was kind of hard of hearing. And right in the middle of a very soft section, he would talk out loud in the middle of a soft section. I heard him say, "This isn't boring," which is very high praise from Virgil. Virgil got me in here in the hotel. I remember one day I was here and he called up the manager. He says, "This is the kind of person you're supposed to have here." Virgil was like that. And so I got in, and I've been here now 28 years. I had a car because I was a traveling salesman, so I used to drive Virgil around. We went out to visit Edward Albee out of Montauk, and he had this beautiful, he comes from a rich family. Altman was fabulous to work for. He was I've known about five people that you could safely call geniuses, brilliant, Martha Graham, Paul Taylor, Leonard Bernstein. The way he had three composers' tapes, and at the end of each day, he had a studio then out in Westwood near UCLA. All the people would gather, and some people, I remember when I was there, Peter Boyle would come in, Lily Tomlin, all these buddies of his, Elliot Gould, and they would all be smoking grass and drinking or whatever they were doing, mainly drinking in those days. And he said, "I want you to listen to some music," and he had 3 tapes, and he put on each of he went into a corner with a stopwatch. A friend of mine who was a costume designer told me this, and he played, and he timed how long it took for the silence to be broken. When somebody suddenly started, even if they said, "This is wonderful," they had stopped listening because they were talking. So he timed it, and I won. I had the longest period of silence before anybody talked. So he gave me the job. Probably more than anything else, even more than instrumental music, which I adore writing, is setting words to music, sort of word painting. Particularly poetry or short things, because each poem, in the Baroque sense, has a conceit, emotional. There's a specific thing that it expresses, and so I try to find a phrase that expresses exactly what that little poem is about. I showed it in Berlin at the film festival in 1985. What it was, I used to do these things that I called theatrical chamber music. The first one I did with Craig Lucas was called Sleep Song, and it was a naked tenor. It was a man in bed who couldn't go to sleep. It was about insomnia, and and his bedposts as the lights came up, turned into bassoons and started playing. And he sang about not being able to sleep and all the things, And so my idea was, if I can give the audience something to look at, they'll stop thinking that this is modern music and what does it mean and what, they'll stop thinking and just listen. A quintessential situation in which you could either die or use it as, or if you survive, use it as a springboard to go somewhere else. And fortunately, I was able to do the latter, not without much help from myself to begin with, in fact. But I went through the very worst of it in New York, which was the late 70s and all the 80s, when I would say 75% of my friends died. But I'm one of the really, really lucky ones that I never got any of the so-called opportunistic infections, and I came because of some wonderful doctors and holistic practices. I learned Reiki, which is an ancient Tibetan thing that the Japanese kind of codified along with everything else that they do so brilliantly. And also mindfulness training, which comes from Zen Buddhism, about how to separate yourself emotionally, detach yourself. So anyway, I learned to practice these, and I now do them daily. I want to do what I'm doing. I love it. It's wonderful.
And you're doing it really, really well.
Well, thank you.
I'm
having the most fun I've ever had in my life because I can do exactly what I want to.